Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bitwig Studio and Music Production. This is lesson 7.00, and in this lesson, we're going to wrap up the entire course. So everything I say here, it's not going to be anything new, but it's just going to be some of the big highlights. We've covered so much material, and now it's time to actually take a step back and think about what does this all mean moving forward. And then the next video I'm going to do kind of a Bitwig Studio review. I think reviews are kind of tricky to do because they're all so personal, but I'll give you my final thoughts on having worked with the software every single day and where I think it's headed. But let's focus on the course first. And for starters, if you've gone through and watched every single video, very impressive feat. I don't think I could sit down and do that. So if you're able to focus all the way through that, you're probably going to be just fine. You're going to end up doing a lot more stuff with music than I probably ever will. The first point here is that techniques and knowledge mean nothing without any application. And that's pretty straightforward. Just because you've watched everything, you've seen me use a compressor, you know what a chorus sounds like, you know when to apply reverb, never means that you've actually done it. So now you have to take all of these tools, all of this knowledge, and find a way to apply it to what you want to do with music. The next point is that you probably won't end up using everything, and that's definitely true. There are a lot of features in Bitwig Studio. There are a lot of features in any DAW or in any synthesizer or any plugin or any piece of hardware, and chances are you're not going to use every one of those features. So don't feel like because it's there, you have to use it. You'll find a process that works for you. You'll keep pulling from the same effects over and over again. And don't worry, that's totally fine. That just kind of means that you're going in the right direction. You're finding the things that work for you, the sound that you want, and you know how to achieve it. So don't just go out of your way to use additional things because you feel like you have to. Next point, it's a marathon, not a sprint. That's something we've talked about a number of times on here. Really getting this stuff takes a lot of time. You know, you can understand all of the controls, but trying to apply them to your own music can oftentimes be rather difficult. So just take your time with it. Don't worry if you're not hearing everything right away. All of that comes with practice, patience, and listening. The tools are irrelevant, and that's probably the point we've stressed more than any other. And I think that music you love is going to be music you love no matter what. And rarely are you asking yourself, like, what plugin is that person using? I wonder what sort of processing they applied. Now, when you're in an active listening mode, you will be asking those questions. But for music that you just really love and music that takes you to another space, you're not worried about all of those technical details. And so, again, I would say you shouldn't be too worried about all of those technical details either. Great music is going to be great music. And just because you don't have every single tool in the toolbox doesn't mean that you still can't put out some really phenomenal stuff. And even though I have my own sort of code when it comes to making music, this really doesn't mean you have to adopt a similar philosophy at all. If you know what you're going for, do whatever it takes to get there. I would just say one caveat to that is just don't take shortcuts for the sake of it. So I always like to use Nexus as my example here. And if you're unfamiliar with the Nexus plugin, it's a very simple plugin. It basically is like a sampler that has all of these phenomenal synthesizer sounds, and you can buy additional add-on packs. And a lot of people will use Nexus and just find the thing that they like, drop it on there, and then process it in that way. They don't actually go into the synthesizer and program it from scratch. And in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with that at all if that's what you're going for. But if you're just being lazy and you're not really thinking through all the steps and you're just like, this is quick and easy, I'll just scroll through presets, boom, bang, bop, and you're done, then you might want to question that process. But you know, I've been kind of critical of using samples and this, that, and the other, but really do whatever's going to work for you. Don't listen to me when I say those things. I just have my own opinions, and it's hard to not let those creep through when you've made so many videos. So hopefully you guys can ignore all of the opinions that I've been throwing out there and just do whatever works for you as long as you have an intention. Okay, don't do something just because it's easy. Do something because it's right. And like I've said before, people like Dr. Luke and other top producers, they're not using Nexus because they don't have people who are capable of programming synthesizer patches similar. They're using it because that's the sound that they specifically like, or they're under deadline, or all other sorts of factors. But it's always a calculated choice and decision. And when you're working behind the computer and you're making music, you're the person in charge of making all of those tough choices and decisions. So think them through and act accordingly. Next point here, and all of these last points are actually things that you can't teach, really. The first one is go your own way. And I'd say just because you know why an effect or an instrument exists doesn't mean that's how you have to use it. And at the beginning of the course, that's what I stressed a lot is just drop something on there, turn knobs, and see what happens. And hopefully throughout the scope of this entire series, you've started to maybe get a little bit more of a reason as to why things are doing what they're doing and how they operate. But that doesn't mean that you have to operate them in the way they were originally intended to be used. A lot of times putting things into experimental territory and going your own way is what's going to make interesting music. And when I say interesting music, a lot of times I'm referring to just different music. So I've heard, a million cookie cutter EDM tracks, most of which are very slickly produced. They sound good. They sound loud. There's nothing wrong with them. But the problem is, at least for me as a listener, they're not that interesting. They're not different. And the more music you listen to, I think the more you start to develop a taste for things that actually fall a little bit outside of your comfort zone or outside of what you're expecting to hear. And so just remember that you can use effects in any way you want. They don't just have to be used in the traditional sort of here is the way that you're taught to use them kind of way. And these last points are really the most important ones. And these are all the things, like I said before, you can't teach, but that you need to learn how to develop. And that's what's going to make probably the biggest difference. So process, practice, patience, persistence, motivation, and belief. So those are a lot of little bullet points there, but ultimately they're the most important thing when it comes to making music. So developing your own process, spending the time to just sit there and practice, experiment, even if the sounds coming out are nothing like what you were going for. Patience along those same lines. It takes time to do this. Don't think that you can just sit down and crank out a perfect track in an hour if you've never done it before. Persistence. That's a biggie. You have to keep fighting through those demons and everybody telling you can't do this or your music sucks or whatever. You have to be persistent, and that's true in life as well as in making music. Motivation. When you don't have other people to motivate you, you have to figure out a way to motivate yourself, whether that's by putting deadlines on yourself or, whatever you have to do to stay motivated. Do it, because that is what is ultimately going to lead to you practicing more, being more patient, being more persistent, etc. And last but not least is just belief. And I really wish that this was something I could teach everybody, and I really wish I could teach myself this as well. You need to believe in yourself, especially if you're doing something like this where you will get a lot of criticism. And I think the reason why there's so much criticism in music production as compared to, say, the fine arts, which there's a lot of criticism there too, but it's on a different sort of scale. With music, people have these expectations. We know what sounds right and what sounds wrong. And if somebody hears something that sounds wrong to them, they instantly go critical. They go negative right away. They're not willing to take the time to try to understand it. And so people will blast you left, right, and center. And that's okay. And it's something that you should expect and actually take with a grain of salt and be happy that your music is eliciting some kind of reaction. I always think that that's what you want. Good publicity, bad publicity. At least people are talking about you. And it's the same thing here. So you need to just believe in yourself, even if nobody else is going to do it. Tell yourself every morning, every night that you can do it, because I personally know you can. It just takes time, it takes practice, and there's nothing else stopping you unless you can't hear. And even then, you can probably still go in there and crank something really crazy out. So I don't think that there's any excuse to not make music if that's something that you want to do. If it's something you don't want to do, if you don't have a passion for it, then don't do it. But otherwise, just recognize that there's nothing holding you back. Age, sex, gender, whatever, religion, race, ethnicity, none of that stuff matters when it comes to making music. None of it does. So just believe in yourself and know that you can do it. So I hope you guys have gotten something out of this course, even if it was just one thing. At least you learned something, and now hopefully you can go forth and apply it. So thanks so much for watching. Take care.